All right, cool. Hey, everybody, this is Wei here over the Six Figure Academy, here with my guest for today's podcast show. We're starting on the YouTube Live early, as we usually do, just so we can get this settled in so I don't have to start both of them at the same time. So if you're just tuning in and you're on YouTube and you don't want to be on the Spreaker app or the Spreaker.com, that's fine too. Just make sure that you say hi, ask any questions that you want to ask. That's Todd right there. Say hey. And then at about noon, we're going to take a quick little pause. Not going to pause the video, but we're just going to pause and start the Spreaker Studio app. So that way the people on Spreaker can hear us as well and not just YouTube Live. So I have to apologize ahead of time. The lighting's a little amazing because we're in sunny winter Southern California, and I thought it'd be a little bit more overcast so we can get a better picture, but at least you could see Todd really well. You know, me, that's okay. You guys see me all the time, so all right. So it's a really exciting show. It's about noon now, so we're gonna go fire this up right here, and let's get the show on the road. Shall we? Shall we? We shall. All right, here we go. All right, welcome to the Money Lab live podcast, episode number 41, how legal conflict can choke money flow. And that means your money flow. All right, welcome back to another live broadcast of the Money Lab from the Six Figure Academy podcast. I am your host, Wei Hong. And this is the podcast where we give you tips, strategies, and interviews with other entrepreneurs, such as the one we have here today, on how to re-engineer bad money stories and habits, other entrepreneurial tips, so that you can create a prosperous and an abundant lifestyle free of financial stress and worries. And I'm really excited about some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Now, if you're joining us live today, make sure you get on Spreaker.com or download the Spreaker app on your phone or your mobile device and search for the hashtag the Money Lab so that you could join us in the chat room and ask questions and interact with us and our guest today. While you're there, subscribe so that you don't miss an episode and can catch us every week. Next week, we've got another guest coming in, super cool guy. I'll share you the details after that. But for all other ways to find us, go to the sixfigureacademy.com/radio for all the details. So, for those of you who are in California or have been in the United States, I mean, this is something probably we can discuss about because our guest today experienced it firsthand, some of the crazy fires that have been going on. But you know what? Let me do an introduction on this guy real quick. I mean, I just met this. Well, I didn't just meet this guy. Actually, I've known this guy for several months now. We just had trouble connecting in person, and we decided the first time we connect is be on my show. You know, why not? But his name is Todd Gallinger. But you know what? I want to honor his path and what he's done. He's Todd E. Gallinger, Esquire. Yes, he is an attorney. He's a nonprofit consultant and California native. He practices out over in Santa Ana, right? And does transactional needs of businesses, nonprofits, and works with the leaders. Gallinger Law is his practice, and what he does, he works with existing clients to strategically manage litigation and legal conflict. He's about 12 years experience. What's really cool about Todd is that he's got this deeper underlying purpose, I feel, because check out his thing. Not only does he have the JD from George Washington University, our first president of the United States, by the way. That's his school. No, I'm kidding. It's probably named after him.
Named after him, yeah. He didn't go there.
Yeah. But he had a BA in religious studies from UC Santa Barbara, both with honors, and is currently a student of the Claremont School of Theology and Religious Leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, here introducing one of the good ones on this planet. I know some of you may have your opinions about certain lawyers, and so do I. And I'm really excited when I finally got his bio and got to dig deep with understanding where this guy was coming from. I mean, in addition to his law practice, I mean, he assists with nonprofits. He does social ventures with strategic planning, fund development, meeting facilitation. He's involved with so many of Southern California's community issues, consulted on numerous local political campaigns, obviously to kind of help further impact some of his underlying desires and purpose and service, you know. He was also recognized as a rising star in nonprofit law by super lawyers and selected by USC's. Ooh, what? That's okay.
I'm a UC. Yeah, I'm kind of
You're a
conflicted
UC
about
guy
having that
too,
on my
so.
bio, but you know.
But that's okay. This is cool though. USC's Center of Religion as for Religion and Civil Culture as part of the Future 50 cadre. Is that cadre? Is that pronounced right? Yeah. Cadre? 50
Close
young
enough.
interfaith leaders bringing social change. This guy, ladies and gentlemen, is all about social change. And on top of that, he's a lawyer, so he's smart and he understands how to navigate through the tumultuous world of entrepreneurship to help entrepreneurs such as you and me and himself do it in the best way possible and avoiding the pitfalls that we're going to talk about today. So welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you so much, Wei. It's great to be here, and always good to be so close to the beach.
I know, right? We're like a block away.
Yes.
And do you guys hear that? This guy is no stranger to radio, by the way. You used to actually have your own radio show.
Yeah, from 2009, 2010, I had a political show, online radio. So
okay, what did you talk about? I mean, it was a political show. Are you heavy into politics? I mean, is that kind of your thing, or?
So it used to be much more of my thing, and definitely around then that was a large focus. And I've done still quite a bit, but right now more as an advisor role than somebody who's directly involved in frontline political campaigns.
Yeah.
So.
And in terms of religious studies, and was that always something that you had an interest in? I mean, you studied at UC Santa Barbara and everything.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think I just started off really as a teen interest, perhaps, and I was always really intrigued by different philosophies and different ways of looking at the world, and always really wanted to understand the motivations that religion brings and how it kind of drives people,
right? Because
it's different from the profit motive that we can easily identify and right. Is out there and we work with,
right,
in this society. And so I think trying to get to some of those deeper purposes, and being interested in the way different sets of people figure that out.
No, that's interesting because the nature of the show, the show is called The Money Lab, so it'd be interesting to hear the money story that you grew up with that made it was it challenging for you to make that decision to go down the path of theology and religion and everything like that initially? Or was it just kind of it was just kind of something that you grew up with and it was just a no-brainer for you to kind of get into?
I think that, looking at kind of my money story as a child growing up, I grew up Southern California, Orange County, Irvine, like
prosperous,
a suburb,
affluent area.
Can be, and we certainly weren't rich. We rented apartments and condos and stuff like that, but very comfortable and lots and lots of educational opportunity for sure.
Right. It's not like you grew up in the project. And
no,
you found God and that's how it.
Yeah, no, nothing like that. Nothing like that by any stretch.
Because there's a lot of those stories, right?
There are, and they're very valuable and informative. But I think there was a sense of comfort in I think especially on my father's side, there's wise planning and an understanding that money's for life. And so my father was an engineer. He actually went back to college, after I was born. And so that's why we moved to Irvine, as he was at UCI. Cool. And so I grew up there when the campus was totally empty. It's just like an empty hill with like 2 buildings on it. And now it's got, it's like 40,000 students.
It's one of the best campuses around now.
Yeah.
My daughter goes there and says,
wow. Good. Yeah, but he managed to retire at 53. His father, my grandfather, who was a school teacher, a public school teacher, retired at 55. And so smart, frugal, investment minded.
Okay.
So I kind of had that.
And he passed that down to you. I mean, did he share that with you, or was he like my father was? Can't talk, don't ask me about it, don't talk to me about it, that type of thing?
No, he definitely shares it, and it's still something we discuss. Just for example, on a personal level, he manages. His parents are still living, and he manages their finances, and he and I talk about some of those issues, managing their trusts and stuff like that. No, I didn't quite go down that path because he was an employee his entire career. He was an engineer, a professional level employee, but always working for somebody else. Right. And I, relatively early on,
had your own practice.
So I started my own practice at the age of 25.
Wow.
I jumped straight into it. I had worked for a couple of years before law school, and then I'd worked full time during law school. But I think I just had the comfort, and I'd been a consultant, done marketing and business consulting before then as an independent contractor. Right. So I kind of knew the structure, but I think I had that confidence that you can do these things. And so I think, having that confidence out of the childhood money story allowed me to undertake some more risks that my parents definitely never did.
Yeah,
so.
but that's amazing though, because most lawyers that I know, they come out and they work for years for firms, and because they think that that's the path to take, and then it's only after like 5, 10, 15, 20 years that they've actually worked for somebody that they said, okay, I'm going to have my own practice now.
Yeah.
But I'm seeing more and more of that today, where people are taking the earlier leap and realizing, I mean, we talked about this a little bit offline before the show in terms of how, our educational system doesn't really train us to make the jump and make that leap that you made 2 years out of finishing school.
Yeah, no. As well as too, I mean, I think in terms of the push towards more attorneys being independent and people starting out on that early, I think that's a positive thing kind of overall.
Right.
But it is a very large part due to the current legal economy, which is really, really bad, especially for starting attorneys.
Right.
And so,
how is that? I mean, for those of that are attorneys listening into the show, I mean, shed some gemstones and drop some knowledge on this one.
so as it comes to this, we have all these undergoing shifts in the economy, right? In terms of outsourcing, in terms of better use of technology, in terms of new business strategies and kind of workflows and things like that. And those have revolutionized business as a whole in the past, 20 years or so. Some industries, and I think these tend to be like highly regulated industries, are, behind the times.
Right.
Medical and especially legal.
DMV.
Yes. Government.
All governments.
Is way behind the times of where, tech industry, entrepreneurship and startups as a whole are.
Right.
And so that kind of shift and transition is ongoing. And so you have new outsourcing firms that utilize attorneys and stuff like that. And so
LegalZoom didn't help either.
Yeah, we can talk about some of those things. They aren't necessarily bad, I think, for attorneys or clients, but they've got to be used smart.
Right.
But yeah, no, you have the outsourcing, you have new AI, document prep systems that overall are just reducing the number of attorneys that are needed to do the same amount of stuff because we're doing it more efficiently and cheaper using outsourced labor. At the same time, we have this, we had this flow or this huge bump of law students and now new lawyers that was caused by the economic recession. And so when the recession was, at its peak, like 08 to 10, maybe, maybe around then, law schools were doubling or sometimes even tripling in size.
People were just like rushing into.
Nobody wanted to go into the economy. There's no jobs. And so everybody's going
to grad school.
They're going to grad school, particularly professional schools and law schools.
Right.
And so law schools exploded. And, I went to George Washington in DC, graduated 2005. 2 years after I'd left, the law school size had doubled.
Holy cow. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Right before the big.
The political science school relocated and they took over the poli-sci department, all of the classrooms and everything that they had from the poli-sci department. Now, the economy is recovering. People are realizing there's not so many jobs for lawyers. Maybe it isn't the best move just to go to law school for the sake of it. Law schools are closing down.
Oh my God.
So I was just actually at coffee this morning. I was meeting with some of my staff, and the people at the table next to us worked at Trinity Law School in Santa Ana, and we started chatting. They overheard our conversation, and they were talking about the economic pressures that they're under. And how
because things are more efficient now, and the traditional tasks and jobs that the lawyers were basically being paid to do.
Because the jobs aren't there, exactly. And because people have realized that the jobs aren't there. Okay. So in Southern California, we recently had Whittier Law School close.
Really?
And they told me of that another one, I don't know if it's been publicly announced yet, that is going to be probably going to be closing within the next few months as well too.
That's
not Trinity, not their school.
Yeah, right. A different school. But in listening what I saw, I was reading in between the lines of what you were just talking about, and I feel like it's almost pressuring the level of service and aptitude that lawyers need to show up with now. It's almost like relieving lawyers of the grind type of work to let them really because lawyers truly, really good lawyers are the ones who don't burden themselves and waste their time on just like, grunt work. Right?
You need all types, right?
Right.
And the way that the legal market has worked, I think the way that our economy pushes us overall is always towards more and more narrow specialization.
Right.
And so, I have friends who I came out of, law school with,
Right.
and now they're specialists in, certain kinds of land trusts that are used by, department stores when they're getting a 99-year lease in the state of Connecticut.
And that's
all that they do all day long. They're very well paid, and, everything is great.
Yeah.
But as now we have those shifts in the economy, that kind of specialized knowledge, sometimes it can now be done by technology. Sometimes it can be done again. You can't really do this as a consumer, as a business person. You can't go out and really effectively outsource legal services, I think. But for certain tasks, if I wanted to, and we don't do this as a firm, I could hire a California licensed attorney in India for $25 an hour to do the work that I would pay, somebody in the States, considerably
$60
more.
an hour.
Yeah, or something like that to do.
Oh, okay. So it's the whole outsourcing.
Yeah. But you're very astute there, in terms of anytime we have a shift in the economy, there's opportunities.
Who's going to adapt?
Yes, exactly.
Who's going to specialize even further, or have a specialized bank of abilities.
Or yes, in a different way sometimes of approaching things.
Right.
And I have always centered my own practice around relationships and around, not necessarily being the deepest expert in any one particular area of law, but working primarily with the leaders of businesses and nonprofit organizations, and what are the issues that come up for them kind of routinely.
That's a niche. I mean,
exactly.
Because nonprofit, I mean, I can give you the names of like 5 lawyers that I know, young whippersnappers, really successful. And when I say nonprofit, they run away, they cringe. They're like,
well, it doesn't pay very well. So that's, there's a reason I have a business practice as well. So.
Right. But that actually says a lot, though. I mean, because, I have a buddy of mine, he's a financial advisor, and his absolute favorite thing to do is to do like the free work, the pro bono work.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, he absolutely loves it. And it's one thing I said, it's so much so that it sometimes gets in the way of his paid business. I said, you got to find that balance.
Definitely.
If you don't feed the source, and the source, withers.
And that's kind of the focus on self-care and everything like that. And, and I do have a lot of experience in the nonprofit industry as well. And that is something, the conversation the past 5-10 years, people are starting to talk about a lot more, because you deal with burnout. And that's always a difficult thing.
Well, I think a lot of people in nonprofit, and I hope this is something that you probably educate all your clients who are nonprofit about this. And this is something I talk about all the time, which is a nonprofit is still a business.
Exactly.
It's just a different designation. It's a different label. You still got to make money
10,000 times. And and what I say is the way I approach this too is nonprofit law is business law. It's just dealing with a specially regulated business.
It's a niche.
Just if I was a banking lawyer, if I was a specialist in health law, there's these sets of laws that regulate that business in that area. Same thing with nonprofit.
And they should pay you as such too.
I agree.
We worked with a few nonprofits ourselves in our business, and it's really interesting coming. And there are a few people that we would have loved to work with, and there are just some boundaries when it comes to value that,
definitely.
When nonprofits come in and they've got their money story running, and they have money anxiety running, and they're trying to nickel and dime you, and even though their intentions are in the best place, we have to make sure, especially in the world that we live in. Now, if it was a Star Trek and money was no longer a means of, it's just the pursuit of knowledge, right? Yeah, we would have done this all day long. We would be able to help everybody and everything, right? But we're not there. We're not born in that.
No, and you're exactly right there, trying to find that balance. And for those of us who, money's a tool,
right?
And so what are we going to put it to use for? If we focus on it for its own thing, we're going to get sucked into a hole,
right?
But in terms of trying to regulate that balance between giving time away or doing things that are helpful versus making sure we're paying our employees and our rent and all of those things, so a thing that I do is I am very structured as I approach those nonprofit things. And,
that's what they need.
Yeah. Well, I give free consultations to nonprofits.
Okay.
And so we'll sit down 60 minutes, 90 minutes, just talk through your issue. If that's what you needed, great. God bless, go on your way. Cool. Fantastic. If you need help beyond that, we have a set of reduced rates that I offer, just because I have so many nonprofit clients. I can't have people, oh, you got to promote me right now. Sorry. Yeah.
So for those of you who are listening right now and you are a nonprofit, we're going to make sure that we leave Todd's information afterwards so you can reach out, because he specializes in all that. And for those of you who are listening to us live right now, remember, you can ask us questions. Just go into the chat room, either on the Spreaker app or on the Google Live interface, whatever it's called, the group chat area.
Hangouts.
Post the Hangouts, right? There you go. And you post your question, and we'll make sure that Todd gets a chance to field it. If not, that's okay, because you could still leave it even if it's not live, and we'll make sure that Todd gets the questions afterwards, so you can connect with him then. So speaking of money as tools, I think one of the most reluctant expenditures for most entrepreneurs and most nonprofits is spending money on entities like yours.
Yes.
They would actually even rather spend money on marketing first, even though sometimes or even knickknacks in the office before spending money on. So let's talk about that, because I've had to go through some serious trials and tribulations to really get to the point where I can appreciate the value of having someone like you, whether it be on retainer or just on speed dial or something like that. Or just to take that extra hour to consult about different ideas, because we were saying earlier before the show started, I mean, I could have avoided all kinds of challenges that I've had to deal with as an entrepreneur. Let's talk about your take first on that before I go too far into it, in terms of the importance of being willing to use money as a tool and spending it, at least some of it, allocating towards legal advice or legal consultation.
Oh, definitely. And you want to be smart about that. We live in a highly legal culture, a highly litigation driven culture.
Yes.
And so if you're a business person, if you're out there in the economy, and you might have a sense of it if you're in a new industry, something, where the laws are changing, or something where you have a lot of stuff that you're selling directly to consumers, you have a lot of customers, that makes it all the more likely that you're going to get drawn into these legal problems.
So basically, like we were saying earlier, as an entrepreneur, as you become more and more successful, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I mean, as frivolous as some may be, it's just going to happen.
It's just part of life.
It's just part of the time that we live in. Right?
Yeah. And you got to figure out, what's smart in your industry and what the level of assistance that you need in your industry is. For example, I have a number of clients in the healthcare industry. If you're a brain surgeon, even if you're the best brain surgeon on the planet, you get sued an average of 3.5 times a year.
Holy cow.
Just the way it goes.
So wait a minute. So if you're a brain surgeon on average, getting sued 3.5 times. So they basically have a lawyer on retainer.
Yeah. So they're going to have
the hospital does.
They're going to have a heck of a lot of insurance is what they're going to have. And those insurance companies are going to have lawyers on retainer and stuff like that.
So that's
that isn't the work that I do when they get sued for that medical malpractice. But I would consult with these clients, for example, about those insurance policies that they have to make sure that those are the appropriate levels for the risks that they're facing.
So you're more of like a preemptive, proactive versus post-mortem type of approach.
I really prefer to sit down. My favorite part of the work is sitting down with somebody who's doing a startup, and it could be a business, it could be a nonprofit. We're going to talk about your dreams. We're going to talk about your vision. We're going to talk about operationally how you're going to get there, and then we're going to try to together. Or we're going to talk together about the operational things that you're going to do. And then I'm going to try to figure out the best legal structure for you to undertake to actually accomplish those. And that's really the best part of my job. But we do, stuff happens and problems do arise. We work with a lot of clients, in terms of managing those risks, and when lawsuits arise, representing them in those cases as well. Right.
So what would you say? I mean, are there any other statistics? Because I know a lot of people probably say, well, I mean, how about these big companies like Apple and Microsoft and all this? I mean, these companies we may not hear about all the time. They're probably getting sued on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's lawsuits filed on a daily basis, probably against.
And they have tens of millions of dollars that they spend every year on attorneys, and basically having their own law firms in house, and
especially have IPs and everything. Also defending your IPs and everything. That's something that we're dealing with right now. Is kind of
And
planning ahead, and
those are very expensive cases. IP cases, especially if you're getting into patents and technology stuff, so expensive. And there's an area as well. If you do the planning ahead of time, if you hire a good patent lawyer, which I'm not, but I can refer you to, ahead of time, you can put yourself in a much better position, avoid potentially millions of dollars in legal fees and litigation.
Yeah, I mean, I still remember, I mean, back in the DualShock days when I was working in the video game industry, I remember when Immersion started clamping down. I mean, they were just waiting in the shadows until Xbox and PlayStation really kind of did the market, owned the market when the DualShock rumbled.
Yeah.
And they came out with their patent and they said, oh, by the way, you guys owe us.
Yeah. That's
literally
the way it
put
works.
companies, the smaller companies, out of business because they couldn't pay all those royalty fees from using that technology.
Assertive licensing is what that's called.
My
and
God.
I actually worked in-house for Boeing for a little bit. I worked in the department that did exactly that. So.
Right. And it's like, but this company, I from what I understand, that's all they did. They just managed IPs.
So they do have that now, and sometimes the derisive term for these companies is patent trolls.
I love that, patent trolls.
the biggest of them, actually, my mom used to work at, is called the Intellectual Ventures, which is a Microsoft, started off by one of the co-founders of Microsoft.
Oh, so your mom worked in that space?
Yeah, so she was a long time Microsoft employee. I grew up kind of in Microsoft orbit. But Intellectual Ventures and these other companies, they go out and they buy up an intellectual patent portfolio, patent portfolio, and then they go out and they look to license them to companies, and if the companies won't sign a licensing agreement, then they sue them. Intellectual Ventures is different because they actually invest a lot in their own research and development.
Right.
But many of the other ones,
which is what we're doing. Yeah.
All they do is buy up patents.
So they're patent trolls.
Yep.
I like that. I'm gonna use that hashtag patent trolls. Hashtag patent troll. Anytime one of those show up in our future, it's like hashtag patent troll. So, question: do you have a PC or do you have a Mac?
I'm PC guy all the way.
PC
and Android. Yep.
I have a mix. I grew up around PCs and everything, and I'm a computer science engineer. That was my major actually. And so I mean the development, platforms and everything was all PC, Linux, Unix. But then Mac is from the Linux, Unix, world, and so. Just from ease of, so I have a blend. I'm a blended household when it comes to the platforms. But I mean,
in the office space, you have to be now, right? Because people have their ecosystems that they live in. If they've got the iPhone, then they've got their MacBook, and so you've got to be able to live with all. But no, I'm straight PC all the way.
Because you grew up in that, right? It's kind of like
I grew up in both. I remember we had a black and white Mac. With a 3.5 floppy in the front.
Oh my God! You mean that little tiny screen?
Well, before then we had a Commodore 64. I remember learning BASIC on a Commodore 64.
Oh, you learned BASIC on a Commodore? What did I learn mine? It was, but I was also doing Fortran too and everything.
I did Pascal later.
I had
we can talk about useless languages.
I know. I have Apple IIe. Apple IIe with the little turtle logo.
Oh yeah.
Remember that?
Yep.
Oh my gosh. So okay, so here's the thing.
Back to money.
Back to money, back to law, because the title of today's show was how legal challenges can literally choke your money flow.
Yeah.
And and the challenge with legal challenges is most of it, I mean, based on what you're saying, most of it can be preemptively avoided.
A lot of it. Okay. And you're going to be in a much better position, of course, if you manage it ahead of time.
Right.
An ounce of prevention for a pound of cure, and that's 100,000 times true here.
I would say in your particular space, an ounce of prevention can basically save your business.
Oh, totally.
Because I mean, just thinking about myself over the years, I mean, thinking back to how many years of lawsuits I've had to actually been in, I didn't even realize how many years has gone by.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're talking about several, maybe 10. I mean, and these are different lawsuits that showed up because as I continue to grow my business, random things that show up. Most of them, the bulk of them are frivolous, but it still costs money for me to kind of manage it and deal with it.
And it costs you money, but that money that you pay to a lawyer in that circumstance is well spent. Because worse than that is it costs you your time and it costs you your focus. And as an entrepreneur and as a business person, as somebody who lives in our economy, you want to put your labor and your time to its highest and best use.
I love that.
If you're not a lawyer, that's not playing around in this lawsuit.
Right.
And so that's why I think for me, it's important to have that established relationship of trust before an issue arises. An issue arises, a client can contact me. issue we can handle, we do it. Not we outsource to, or not outsource, but normally refer out to a specialist in that field who handles that niche. But hopefully you as the business owner, as the entrepreneur, you're basically exporting your stress to me. You're letting me take it over, and hopefully you can trust in me to handle those issues. I'll let you know when I need your input. I'll let you know when I have information or documents that we need from you, and I'll let you know kind of these issues that are coming up.
Right.
But the goal is that you can get back to managing your business. You can get back to those things that actually result in the money flowing to you.
Right. No, I mean, it's. I think it goes back to what's the best use of your time. Yes. And in a world where everything moves so quickly, it's almost like you can't afford to even spin your tires. Like just 15, 20 years ago, you could spin your tires for a little bit and still be okay. Today, you spin your tires, you've got your competition, you've got the rest of the world, you've got your clientele. Yeah, they're not going to sit around and wait for you to get your act together. As their patience isn't as much as it used to be.
Things move fast, and we're under tremendous stress and demands for our time. Our culture is that we have to constantly be busy, and living here in beautiful Southern California, that's what we have to do if we're in certain urban markets in order to make a living and have it go. But there's a danger there in terms of if we do get caught up in that rush and those pressures and that stress where we don't make strategic decisions. And so I think, particularly when there's something that's so stressful and such a big deal, that's when you need to take a step back, take a look at the bigger picture and figure out, do I need to be dealing with this stress? Is this a problem for me to handle? Or is there somebody else I can, shove this problem off onto?
Right. And don't think Google will give you the accurate and the best suggestion.
Dr. Google, yeah.
It could point you in the right direction, but I don't know how many horror stories I've heard of people making big, huge legal decisions based on some legal blog they read about a particular thing. And I heard one recently where the guy made a decision and he failed to realize that the blog was not even talking about his own state.
So that's one thing exactly is law is very specific and changes from state to state, as well as from industry to industry, sometimes from locale to locale in terms of your local business licensing requirements and everything like that. So, legal advice is given to a specific situation, a specific time, person, geography bound situation, not just forever
industry
on the internet
and everything.
But I also want to caution people though, in terms of only finding a lawyer online, or looking for a lawyer and finding the best rated person on Yelp or on Avo, which is the #1 legal rating site that's out there. And this is coming from somebody who has a 10.0 rating on Avo. Those sites can be helpful in identifying specialists, and they can be helpful a lot of times now. They do link to attorneys' disciplinary records. So you can see if somebody's been suspended or had issues, and that's a good warning flag to know about. But you definitely want to rely as much as possible on personal referrals and recommendations.
And I think experience.
Yes, and particularly within the business area, though again, I have good ratings on those things, and there's ways, there's things as attorneys you can do to game those systems. Same things with awards. I'd be very cautious for the awards I list that are legit awards. Sometimes, sometimes you'll see ones, and somebody will be the top 10 business lawyer in Orange County, such and such.
Oh, you can buy those.
Such region, exactly. And you go and you look at it, and I'm the top 10 lawyer in this six block region amongst lawyers who've registered and paid you money. And so that greatest lawyer in Orange County or LA or wherever it is, isn't really worth very much.
It's the greatest lawyer in your 6 block radius of your neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is such an important topic because, like I was saying, there's so many things that we talked about right before the show, but I used to refer to spending money on legal fees and everything as necessary evils. I have since changed that because I don't, if you guys can see, if you guys aren't on, he doesn't look very evil at all. In fact,
well, I wouldn't necessarily disagree. I think, but in an ideal world, it wouldn't be so legally driven, and once we get to the law, and once we get particularly to lawsuits, stuff's gone off the rails. Stuff isn't right. Somebody's screwed up somewhere. Somebody's making bad decisions. Somebody's,
and it's so dependent. It's so dependent on humans not making an error. you know, and I think it's how you talking about the antiquated systems as well. I think our current system almost needs a massive overhaul. You know, based on my own experience, just seeing what happened to some of my circumstance, I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. How this is even possible, and yet it still happens. You know, and that could explain why a lot of people don't have a lot of faith in the legal system, even though they got the best lawyer in that they can afford.
Yeah,
the system still somehow cracks under pressure, if you will.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the system isn't, you know, engineered to be fair for everybody. And so you're the little guy, you're the little company, you're kind of coming up, you know, it's going to be more stressful on you.
Right.
The way that the system is designed and built in America, you pay your own legal fees. Even if you win, typically you pay your own legal fees.
Right.
If you lose, you definitely pay your own legal fees.
And you might pay some other fees.
And you might get taxed with others as well too.
Right.
But in general, you pay your own legal fees.
Right.
Versus some other systems where the winner's automatically awarded attorney's fees.
Right.
And so you can see, you know, if you're the little guy having a startup and you're in some IP conflict with Sony or Apple or whoever it is, and they can bring $1 million to the table, and you can bring $10,000 to the table.
Come up with a different idea.
Yeah. So you really have to, you have to be smart in managing those. And you do just, you know, it's part of the environment. So I wouldn't necessarily debate that it's a necessary evil, but it's necessary. Don't not recognize that it's necessary, and do plan for it to come up.
I see it as almost as necessary education, because every time I've made a decision to interact with a good lawyer such as yourself, I found myself learning so much about, you know, how to plan moving forward, and you know, kind of like that 20/20 hindsight. It's like, oh, and then, you know, not beating myself up too much about it, but then passing that knowledge on to somebody else, like a client, because I work with entrepreneurs. Those are my clients, and I said, you know, I went through this, and this is what I learned, and this is what I learned from the lawyer. But, you know, again, back it up by talking to a lawyer. So what would you recommend then for, you know, a little bit about my spotted history in terms of having to deal with all these little legal challenges as an entrepreneur? What would you recommend for, you know, startups or people who have yet to encounter what we've been talking about, that once you see a level of success, someone's going to show up, and just frivolous or not, you're going to have to be dealing with some kind of legalese stuff. You know?
You know, definitely you want to consult with a lawyer anytime you're going through any sort of business transition. You know, there's certain legal risks you want to make sure, and certain, you know, business risks that are out there that you want to make sure you have a help with an attorney in terms of always managing, such as hiring, you know, having lease reviewed and stuff like that as those things go forward.
Right.
Excuse me. Definitely in terms of the startup phase, and again, I think any other major business transition, you want to talk with an attorney and make sure that the stuff that's being done there is being structured right.
Maybe just talk about the big scope of everything that you're doing,
talk
your
about
idea,
the big picture, and exactly, but and then even refine it in from there, because, you know, as I approach things, operation has to run. You don't live, you don't work in the legal world. You live and you work in the real world.
Right.
And the real world stuff is where you're going to make money. It's my job to come in and provide you as much legal protection as I can to structure things in the best way possible, so you can do those operational things that actually make you the money. The law doesn't make you the money. So that shouldn't be the thing that, you know, drives the business structure. It should be the operations and, you know, the business methods that drive that. And so I need to sit down with you, and I need to have a conversation with you where I can understand those, and I can figure out what's going on, and who are your customers, and how are you going to market, what's your client acquisition strategy, what are the different contracts that we need to protect you in those certain circumstances, who are your investors going to be, what are your future plans for investment, and so then we can structure your corporation right, so we don't have to go through and do a restructuring, you know, each time one of those issues comes up. Just real quick on issues kind of like LegalZoom and some of the other self-help systems that are out there. If somebody's sophisticated and educated and has gone through these things before, then those can be, I think, very effective tools. I think some of the problems with LegalZoom and some of the other automated self-help systems is that they're too easy and too simple, and that you may not know the answers to the questions that you're being asked. And so, just to be very honest, I've never had somebody come in with a corporation that they created on LegalZoom where I didn't have to restructure it. And most of the time, that restructuring was more expensive than it would have been to just do the startup from the beginning. And it wasn't that there was anything wrong with the LegalZoom system. It created the documents exactly that the client told them to create. but they didn't know the difference between
Right.
shares that are issued versus shares that are authorized, and how many shares you want to issue and how many shares you want to hold in reserve for investors, and other various issues that do come up that you want to think through when you're structuring the corporation at the beginning.
Yeah.
And so those are the types of conversations that definitely at startup phase it's worthwhile to have. When you're hiring your first set of employees, you want to have. If you have investment structures coming in, you want to have. And then you're going to save yourself all of those problems that arise in the future.
I mean, it sounds like the same type of conversation that you should have with your legal with your lawyer or attorney for your business is the same kind of conversation you would have with almost every service provider, like your accountant, your tax accountant, your tax lawyer.
Yes.
Everybody who is there to support what you may not necessarily be good at. So how important then would you say is it for an entrepreneur to have at least one business lawyer on speed dial in their contact folder? I mean, to have a relationship somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important. I think it's a thing that if you're a business person, like we said, it's a necessary evil. Right. And if you're not incorporating this in, if you don't have a line item in your budget,
driving one eye blind.
Yes, right? Yeah.
Is that a group?
Third eye blind.
Third eye blind.
Yeah, we're dating ourselves.
That's right, third eye blind. It's one eye blind. That's a new band.
Yes,
that's the new one. One eye blind.
Well, that's the spin-off from the singer only. That's
exactly.
a solo project.
That's a solo project. Yeah. I'm third eye blind, but now I'm one eye blind. Yeah. But no, seriously, I think it's like driving one eye blind. Your perception is off. Now, granted, you could probably drive day to day, but because your depth perception is off, sooner or later things will become more challenging than it needs to be.
As well as too, you're driving through an environment that maybe you don't know how to recognize the risks. There might be blind spots and black ice, and we can take this metaphor farther. That you may not recognize as you're driving through this.
No, I love that.
So if you don't sit down, I do think about it very consciously as kind of planning out the map. And we're going to sit down and we're going to talk, and what the information that you're going to give me, and sometimes the information that I bring with me from my experience, that's our geography. Where you want to go, that's the point where we're trying to go. And then we're going to discuss the course that we take, across the map, across the real world that we live in, to get to the goal that you have.
Yeah.
And if you don't talk to somebody who recognizes those risks tax-wise and stuff like that as well, you're going to run into issues, you're going to have problems. You also want to think about, when this problem arises, is that when you want to be searching for the answer to find somebody?
Yeah, I'll tell you that right now, no, because that was the approach, the post-mortem approach I used to take, and that got me into a whole heap of crazy challenges.
Yeah. And you're under stress, and you're not necessarily thinking clearly.
No, absolutely not.
Lawyers are business people, and many lawyers are sharks. And we can talk about all the reasons in the economy and the legal industry that lead to that. But I always tell people, even if I'm referring to somebody, to a good friend of mine, talk to 2 or 3 lawyers, find their approach, find somebody you feel comfortable with, and then make sure that you work with them. It's a relationship that you need to rely on. So if you're under stress and you're not going to be thinking through that process,
and you're
clearly,
not probably make the best decision.
And somebody who's out there, can put that pressure on you and can get you to do stuff and be,
That's what happens.
Yes. So when we do, litigation is not my focus. Like, I don't like being involved in lawsuits. I prefer my clients to be focused on their business and working in that world. But we do get involved in, again, strategically. And so that's always the question for us, is how do we strategically manage litigation so that's as painless as possible to our clients? Once you're involved in a lawsuit, you're not going to win. Nobody's a winner in my mind. Even if you're the one who's filing the lawsuit because you were fired from your job, or the client didn't pay you according to the contract or something like that. Even if you're the one who's filing the lawsuit, 99% of the time, you're still not going to get what you would have gotten had the person paid you or not fired you or not done the thing. So almost all of the time, everybody involved in a lawsuit is a loser. Except the lawyer.
Except the lawyers, right?
Yeah, but our goal is to get you out of as little pain as possible. But I think once you've accepted that, and you're not focused on winning, sometimes you can take a little bit of a step back and focus on your business. Get back to treating it as a distraction and
right.
minimizing that distraction.
And do what you're here to do.
Yes.
As an entrepreneur, which
Yes.
is serve whatever it is that you're here in the way you're here to serve.
Grow and build and create.
You know, I love this approach that you have. And, you know, even though I've spoken to a lot of different lawyers in the past, just this very holistic, very almost like a heart-centered approach, you know, very conscious approach to how you want to, I mean, you could just tell, I mean, for those of you who aren't in the room, and that's all of you because there's only 2 of us in here except for my dog.
Yeah, we got her.
And well, if you're on the camera, YouTube, you could see, I mean, this guy is actually coming from a genuine place, which is, you know, I heard other lawyers say the same thing. You know, and I think it's, you know, I guess maybe it depends on the fit and stuff like that. And like you were saying, you know, you got to interview people. Not everybody's a fit for everybody, right? And I think this is a good segue to talking about maybe, you know, how then if they don't have somebody already that they trust and that has done good work for them, how do they go out to find the right one? What's the process that you would recommend that would help them kind of align themselves with the best fit when it comes to a lawyer for themselves and their business and their industry?
Yeah. So I mean, I think, you know, in some ways the process is the same, regardless of if we're doing it proactively because we see we've got some transition coming up and we want to be smart about it, or we just got served with a lawsuit and, you know, now we're really under the gun and we've got to find a guy in the short term. Either way, you know, even if you feel that you're under the gun, I would kind of hit pause and I would try to think about how that fits into, you know, your overall business structure.
I love that you said pause. What would you suggest they do? Because I know in a high stress moment, you're not thinking straight.
Yeah.
And what would you,
very difficult.
What would you recommend? And this would be great coming from a lawyer. What would you recommend they do in that pause moment? It's a moment, or is it a day? Or, I mean, what's
I think it depends. I mean, no, it's not a day, particularly if you've gotten served with a lawsuit, because you need to get moving. But, you know, whatever it is that you do in your life to kind of relax and calm down and do self-care stuff. For me, I'm an outdoor guy. I'm a nature guy. I walk all the time. So something pops up, something's really stressful. I have sometimes my own legal challenges, you know, things like that come up. You know, before I make a decision, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to go take 15, 20 minutes, let the things process and run through my mind.
That's beautiful.
I'm going to try to think and figure out how this fits into the big picture and kind of what my objectives are. If I go into a lawyer's law firm, you know, if I go into an office and all I'm thinking about is we need to win this lawsuit, you know, I'm going to get a guy who's a pit bull and he's going to say, yeah, we're going to throw all the money at this problem and we're going to eat him up and bite in and never let go. And I'm going to think that that's a great idea. Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Or maybe it isn't.
Or maybe it isn't. There's certain circumstances. There's certain circumstances where I refer out clients to guys I know are pit bulls because sometimes you want that. Sometimes you need that. But you don't want to be driven to it. You want to make sure that you know what your goals and objectives are before you work with somebody. You want to take the time and talk to a couple of people at least, even if you just got a lawsuit served on you and now you've got to file an answer.
And you don't have a lawyer.
And you don't have somebody, still take the time to talk to at least a couple of people. And if you don't feel, you know, comfortable with them, talk to a third person. You know, it's really important that you get somebody that's there. If you need more time, you know, you could probably contact the other office, the other attorney who filed the lawsuit against you, and get more time. But it's important that you establish that good relationship and have somebody who you trust, who has a plan for the lawsuit that fits with your goals. And if you haven't thought through your goals, you're gonna have no idea about that.
Yeah, you know, and then that's another thing, is another challenging thing, is what if people can't gauge on, like, how do they know what's comfortable, what's not comfortable? How do they gauge with what feels right, what doesn't feel right? You know,
you got to go with your gut at some levels. You know, you think these things through, and you know,
because it's not just all here too. It's also
it's a combo. Yeah, it's a combo, and you want to find a relationship and a strategy that matches with both. You know, and so there is definitely like a head part to it in terms of making these legal decisions.
I'm glad you said it, because I just realized not everybody's seeing me. I'm just pointing. So you guys see what I'm pointing at? No, it's not just in their head, right?
Yeah. So it's not just an intellectual decision, but it is in large part an intellectual decision, and so we'll sit down and we'll spreadsheet out kind of different options that we have, and what are the percentages that we think different outcomes might be, and what are the different revenue impacts we think that that might have if we settle the case versus not, and try to come up with, you know, our best projections about what the economic impacts of each set of choices will be. At the same time, we have to recognize those are projections and those are estimates, and those are things that ultimately we're still going off of our gut when we're assigning that 10%, you know, success rate or something like that. Maybe an experienced and an expert gut, but it's still a gut prediction. And so we have to make sure that I think our head and our gut, our heart are kind of, you know, in alignment. And if they're not, then find the time, try to make the time to get on that right path.
So I love that you said, so it's the head, the heart, and the gut.
Sure, we'll go with that. That sounds like a good thing. I hadn't thought that.
That's pretty good. It's head, heart, and gut, you know, and this is the kind of lawyer this guy is. He's a head, heart, and gut kind of guy, you know.
I got feet too and hands. It's amazing.
He's a human being. He's a full human being, and he's a lawyer. He's not a robot. He's not a pit bull.
That actually is something I talk to my staff about, and something that I think it is really important for us to remember, is that we're human beings as lawyers, but also that our clients are human beings. And so our clients come in and they have objectives that go far beyond the dollar or price that, you know, is going to come out of the lawsuit. And a lot of times there's other ways that if we take a step back and approach things, we can find what maybe is a win-win solution, you know, something that's better for them than had we fought the case out and won it. And that still leaves the other side, you know, in a better situation than had we fought the case out and won it. And so if you're able to take a step back, not be so involved in the conflict, then you can sometimes find those more creative solutions.
That is such a beautiful gemstone right there. It's like, you know, sooner or later as an entrepreneur, the longer you're in it, you're going to encounter conflict, you're going to encounter challenges in the world of law. But being able to step out and be detached from the conflict. So when you make your decisions about the conflict, you're not still in the conflict in terms of mental state of mind, emotional state of mind, everything.
And that comes out of, though, consciously recognizing what your emotional and mental relationship to the legal issue is. So you can't effectively take that step back and take the big picture until you recognize what's drawing you in, you know?
Now I see why you were referred to my little world, you know, because as you recall, you were referred to me, you know, by
and that is the best way, I think, to find people again. You know, if there's somebody who's out there who has a business similar to yours, you know, these guys, right? These are the people who are in your breakfast group for CEOs and startup guys. You know, these are your friends who you came up through school with, who have their own, you know, projects and stuff right now. Talk to that circle. And again, talk to it before the problem arises. If you have a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to talk to a couple of lawyers, that's much easier than having 2 days to talk to a couple of lawyers.
Yeah. So I think the big takeaway is this for our audience is that, you know, one of them being that whole, that gemstone, that mic drop that you just did, which is, you know, step out of the conflict before you make a decision about the conflict, and step out of the conflict, have that conversation with yourself and then with the lawyer, right? And then in terms of making sure that an entrepreneur at any level, to make sure you're proactively making sure you have a relationship with a lawyer that is there to help you, you know, become successful. Having it on speed dial. You don't need to retain him or her, right? You just have to have that relationship with that person. And if they're not willing to have a relationship, build a relationship with you without charging you an arm and leg, that might be one of those where the head, heart, and gut is not in alignment, right?
No, and you should expect to pay a lawyer something, and you should expect you do want to value their time.
Absolutely,
and it's a tough industry
because it's their business too,
and legal fees are ridiculously high. But there's a reason why they are, you know, and, you know, just as a person, I try to do everything fair and effectively, and I still don't like the price level that I have to set for fees, but that's just the way that the economy is. So it is going to be something that you do need to pay for, but you shouldn't be being milked. You know, you should have an understanding of what you're paying for. And if you don't have an understanding, if all you're hearing is a bunch of jargon that's getting thrown at you, stuff may not be actually being done, you know?
So
or people are just running their wheels and doing that typical stuff that drives the case forward. So one of the reasons I don't like being in litigation is...
There's a lot of that happens, huh?
Well, there's a lot I don't like about litigation. There's a lot of litigation that's out there too. But one of the things is that the process is so technical and so heavy. And so 90% of my work is not really focused towards my client's problem so much as it is the system itself. And if you have a lawyer who all they want to do is manage the system and do all the check marks of the things that they're supposed to do to protect their own butt as a lawyer, you're going to end up paying huge, huge, huge legal fees.
Right.
In order to avoid that, though, you have to have I think an emotional handle on the issues that are going on, and kind of understand how it fits in your business overall.
Right.
And again, have that trusted relationship
so
too.
It's kind of almost, I based on how you're describing it, I would see litigation almost like when you're fencing. There's a lot of pairing. There's a lot of like this. There's very few strikes. There's very few actual intentional lunges or anything like that. Not that it's a sword fight, but it kind of sort of is, right?
I mean, like so if we want to get very philosophical about it here and want to talk about it, what the law is it's when we're allowed to use violence as a society. It's when society is permitted to use violence, when police are authorized to arrest people and put them in jail, and that's a form of violence. When we're allowed to force people to do things, and if you don't pay over the lawsuit, that pay over the money that was in the judgment against you in a lawsuit, the sheriff's going to show up to your office and pull out all your furniture, and that's a form of violence against your property.
Sure.
Ultimately, the law is about regulating violence, and we as lawyers are kind of like gladiators then.
Right.
And actually, if you look at it, and this is something in some of my background and having done Aikido and studied some Japanese philosophy and Zen stuff, you can see comparisons between Bushido and then attorney ethics. Because you're going out there and you're fighting for this master. And my objectives when I'm a lawyer is to serve the master.
Right.
And we've had some conversations today that kind of fit in these big picture heart and head and stuff. So when I'm engaged in the lawyer mode, it's not my heart that's engaged. It's my client's heart that's engaged. And so that's part of one of those things. When I'm in my ethical system, I'm not making moral judgments about what my client's doing. It's my client's call to make those moral calls about what's appropriate to them. And for me to execute. And if I feel inappropriate, then I just take a step back, and that's not my job. And you hire somebody else.
You become a Ronin.
Yes, exactly. We know the culture.
Yeah, I'm out of here. Okay, cool. So wouldn't you know it, we're actually right about the top of the hour. I told you time would fly.
Yep.
And there's so much more that I would love to have you back on the show again, because I think there's some really cool gemstones, because I think this is a topic that a lot of entrepreneurs just avoid. I mean, I know I myself in my younger years just avoided lawyers like the plague. I mean, just dealing with law and spending and not that I regret it, but in looking back, I was like, God, there's so many lessons and so many things I could have. Well, I mean, the lessons were learned, and there's some lessons I didn't have to learn as hard, hardly, and I could have learned it through the eyes of my lawyer, right? So, for those of you who are entrepreneurs who don't have somebody on speed dial, and you're local here, and you're in California, or I encourage you to reach out to Todd, and because. If it's not a good fit, there's network. He knows other lawyers that you can refer to, but have somebody on speed dial. Have somebody to have that peace of mind that if something comes up, you can go cry on their shoulder, and they'll go out like a knight in shining armor, and they will fight for you. And they will fight for what's right, especially if it's those frivolous lawsuits that I've been dealing with for so many years right now. So that being said, Todd, how do people reach out to you? And to get a hold of you, to connect with you, to have that initial conversation with you?
Sure. So our firm number is 949-862-0010. We're also online, gallingerlaw.com, GALLINGERLAW.com. We're also on Facebook.
Oh, nice.
And I think that's on Twitter, but we don't really use it.
I know. Who uses Twitter really besides the president? I mean,
if you like to argue, Twitter.
If you like to argue, yeah, it is. It is. Somebody just, it's really sad, but a porn star just recently over a Twitter thing. That's a whole different discussion anyway.
Different combo.
That's a different conversation. But okay, cool. So reach out to Todd for those of you who are looking to or in the market for finding an amazing head, heart, gut-driven, knight in shining armor who has a background in theology and really good ethics and a really good heart. I mean, this is one of the most surprising interviews I've had in a long time in terms of, because I didn't, I barely knew you. I mean, just from brief conversations.
We talked about practical issues, but not really but nothing, any life stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And just your perspective on things as a lawyer is so refreshing, and I'm so excited. When you do call, make sure you mention the show, and maybe he'll give you a little something,
definitely.
like a 30-minute thing or something that.
Well, no, no. Mention the show, and we can definitely do a free phone consult.
Yeah,
No
do mention the Money Lab. And as an entrepreneur, you want to make sure you have somebody. And I encourage you, I implore you that if you are an entrepreneur, whether or not you started out or you've been in business for a while, if you do not have a good, solid lawyer team or someone on speed dial, get someone soon. And I highly recommend this gentleman that's sitting in front of me right now. And if you need information, just reach out. We have his information as well in case you didn't catch it. We'll post it in the comments later after the show is done. But other than that, Todd, thank you so much for coming in. And I know it's super last minute, but I think it was so perfect that you having a background in radio too helped a lot, made it really easy.
Good. Thank you.
I would love to have you back on the show again if you're open to it, and then we can talk some more fun metaphorical legalese entrepreneur stuff. Okay, so thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That was our show for the week. Join us next week when we get to talk to my binaural frequency guy, website guy, ultimate super entrepreneur. He's kind of nomad traveling around, and he's gonna pop by the studio and talk to us. Eric is gonna be amazing, so make sure you don't miss that show next week. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, have an amazing week. And for those of you who are in Southern California dealing with fires, stay safe, stay moist. And other than that, have an amazing week, and we'll catch you guys next week. Okay, go get that lawyer that'll help support you. Oh, we forgot to say goodbye to the YouTube people. All right, YouTube people, thank you for checking it out. You're probably not watching right now, but if you're watching this recording, we'll see you next week.